What to grow in February? 5 great plants that I think you are going to love growing, so that over time you can easily build up your own collection of great plants. Plants that are going to give you food, plants that will bring you flowers and colour, and plants that are going to give you leaf interest, and most of all, fill your garden all year round. Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back. I get asked all the time for my top plant recommendations, but at this time of year, starting plants, particularly from seed, can be tricky. And let's face it, the garden can still feel, well, a little bit bare. But today, I've handpicked 5 truly brilliant plants for you. Some that you can start from seed, some that you can go out and buy to give you some instant impact, and lots more. So, let's get stuck in. Sometimes there's something lovely about appreciating something up close in the garden, where the plant itself may be small, but it's beautiful and fleeting, so that it draws you out into the garden to enjoy it before it's gone. And for me, crocuses do just that. In the late winter and early spring, you're going to start to see crocuses popping up with their small goblet-shaped ultra-fine flowers in the most gorgeous shades of mauves and purples, yellows and whites and more. But the real interest comes from looking closely at them, the way the colours shift through the flower, or the bright colour of the stamens that are inside the flower. And before you know it, the flowers have disappeared for another year. Now I know you're probably thinking that the time for planting crocus bulbs has passed, right? Yep, you're 100% correct. But that doesn't have to stop you from adding them into your garden now, because you can buy them like this in small pots from the garden centre. They're really affordable, a couple of euro each, and then you can add them really quickly and easily into containers or into borders in your garden. Although I said that the flowers are fleeting, the beauty of crocuses is that because they're a bulb, they're going to come back year after year, slowly spreading and increasing in numbers, giving you lovely little patches of happiness all around your garden when, let's face it, in February like this, we need it. There's no need to get out your pen and paper. Head across to my website, niallgardens.com, or follow the link in the description down below for all of my show notes and the plants that are featured in today's episode. If you're looking for an easy-to-grow vegetable, but you're a bit tight on space, you're gonna like my next suggestion, chard. Just like most leafy greens, chard does really well in cool conditions. So if you live in a relatively mild climate, like I do in Ireland, you can sow some now and bring it on through the spring. What I would say is it's still a bit on the cold side to be sowing direct out into your beds, but you can get ahead by sowing some under cover and let the baby plants develop so that then they can be planted out in a few weeks' time. Fun fact for you, if you haven't tasted chard before, most people would describe it as having an earthy flavour, almost as though you can actually taste the soil. That's because it contains a specific compound in it that's called geosmin that gives it that specific flavour. What I love about chard is that as well as being really tasty to eat, it can be ornamental. If you opt for a variety like I usually do, which is called bright lights, and you can see all the colours already in the seedlings, the stems come in all kinds of colours. Rhubarb pinks, reds, yellows, golds, whites, and you can see here, the plants really do stand out. I'm also growing white stemmed variety called Lucullus, which is a really strong performer. If you're of a more impatient nature, you can harvest the plants as baby leaves. They're great in salads, or instead leave the plants to grow on to maturity to enjoy the leaves and stems. What's brilliant about chard is that you only need to make maybe 1 or 2 sowings per year, because you can treat the plants just like a cut and come again lettuce, simply removing the leaves as you need them. And as if that wasn't enough, they're really tough plants that will happily survive both a dry spell, but at the same time, a cold spell. They're not too fussy, they'll even survive frost. My plants here are the ones that I sowed way back last year. So give some chard a go and bring some Technicolor leafy greens into your life. From one leafy plant to another, and I want to recommend for February, ferns. They are exceptional plants to grow in the garden because their lush green fronds add texture and depth to your garden. I've got 4 different varieties here, and just look at the variation that you can get, from broad strappy leaves to finely cut fronds, even variegation. This one is gold and green, but there's a specific reason why I'm recommending them now. Head to the garden centre and you're likely to find ferns being sold in little pots like this. They're being sold as filler plants for containers, and that means that you can buy them as relatively small plants and relatively cheaply. And for me, cheap plants means one thing, and it's not saving money. It means buying loads of them. Ferns are particularly valuable for their ability to thrive in shady areas where so many other plants are just going to struggle. It makes them ideal for filling under trees or containers or north-facing gardens. They're low maintenance. They don't demand very much other than once they're planted that you stay on top of their watering, I suppose, and a bit of protection from very harsh sunlight. But since they're so easy to care for, it makes for a really practical choice if you want to add a nice lush look into your garden with minimal effort. Next up, let's talk about an easy to grow, hardy edible, broad beans. They're a really tasty crop, and you don't need that many plants to get lots to eat. Once the plants start cropping, they're going to produce dozens of big fat pods full of beans, which are really hearty and tasty. When they're fresh, just lightly cooking them is going to give you a great vegetable side dish, or you can quickly blanch them and then freeze them so that you can enjoy them later in the year. And best of all, broad beans can either be sown now or in the autumn. For spring sowings, you can start your broad beans anytime from now. This year, I'm growing a couple of varieties. One's called Eleonora, and this one is called Ratio. My personal preference is actually, though, rather than direct sowing them, to start them in little pots like this, getting them established before planting out the young plants. Last year, I direct sowed mine into the ground, and then a really deep, long, cold snap killed all of the broad beans stone dead. They were just that little bit too small. If you want even earlier harvests, you can grow them under cover in an unheated polytunnel or something similar to that. Another advantage of broad beans is that they actually improve the condition of the soil. When it's time to remove the broad beans themselves once you've had your harvest, rather than pulling them out, cut them down to the surface and leave the roots in the ground. The root systems have nitrogen-fixing nodules that, as they decompose, release all of that good nitrogen back into the soil. Give them a try for yourself and enjoy your harvest of broad beans later this year. Time to start looking ahead to the warm, sunny days of summer, and that means flowers. So for my next recommendation, I want to suggest growing antirrhinums, commonly known as snapdragons. They're a really versatile cottage garden style flower that were a firm favourite of gardeners for a long time. But then they fell out of favour and they became a bit uncool for a while. But they've made a comeback, and they've made a comeback in a big way. And I think that's because they perform just so well in so many garden situations. They're technically short-lived perennials, but most people would grow them as annuals instead. The flowers stand out for their distinctive dragon-shaped blossoms, which come in what can only be described as a kaleidoscope of colours, including reds, yellows, pinks, oranges, whites. This year, I'm growing pure white ones that are called Snowflake, but a couple of years back, I grew bicolour ones, and they looked epic. Once they get going, they have a really long flowering season, so you're going to get good value out of your plants. They'll keep flowering often from spring all the way through to autumn, giving you loads of colour for a long period. They make great cut flowers, but they don't just benefit us, and they don't just look pretty. They attract pollinators such as bees and butterflies, so it's again promoting biodiversity in your garden. You can start sowing them from seed now, even though I know it feels really early. What you will need is a propagator to get these seeds to germinate. They need a little bit of heat, and it does take a little bit of time as well to get them to sprout. Once they've sprouted, they also need a little bit of time to get established. So for all of those reasons, it's worth getting a head start and getting these going early in the season around now. Or alternatively, note this suggestion down and wait until later in the spring when you can simply go out to the garden centre and buy the plants. And then you don't even need to do all of this bit. You can just buy the plants, get them in the ground, and enjoy the colour and the flowers. Before you go, sowing and planting times do vary from region to region, so make sure to look up and understand your own local growing conditions and your last frost date. I love suggesting plants, so check out last year's February suggestions from me in this video, or if you want to think ahead and you want to get a head start, check out this video here. And until next time, see you later.